Hello folks and welcome to the weekend warm-up with me, Will Buxton, and him, Lawrence Barretto. Still in our bubble, still in the paddock, but a different paddock, as you will see. No longer the Red Bull Ring. 2 lovely weeks there, but it's great to be at the Hungaroring.
It's beautiful. This is one of my favourite races of the season. It's a little cooler this weekend. There might even be rain this weekend, which could really mix things up. But this is a great circuit, a different circuit to Austria. Should be different, I think.
If it rains, you'll have to put your galoshes on. Different footwear today than the yellow monstrosities last week.
I don't think these are wet weather or intermediate proof, so I think we're in a bit of trouble if it starts to rain.
I think you're in a bit of trouble anyway.
It's the nicest thing you've ever said, Will.
I know, I try. So of course we're going to bring you all of the news that we've heard and debated, easy for me to say, throughout the day. Steve, our incredible, intrepid cameraman, will walk backwards for the next quarter of an hour plus, and we'll talk. So let's start at Mercedes, dominant in the opening weekends. Feeling good coming into this one?
Yeah, I think Lewis was really interesting today when he was talking about how he's expecting a real fight from Red Bull this weekend. But I think the reality is that Mercedes were improved here at this circuit last year, and I think they're going to be a real talking point this weekend.
It's Bradley. See, he's hiding. I thought he was going to jump out. Valtteri has been on it ever since the start of the season. Championship leader. He's feeling great coming into this. I spoke to him earlier today, and one of the things I put to him was, the months off that we had over lockdown, and how good that had been for him. But particularly because he'd spent it with Auntie, his trainer. He'd spent it with Tiffany, his missus, and actually that little bubble of people are still around him at the race, and that's really, really important. And he said, you know what, I actually hadn't really thought of it like that, but yeah, it's really nice to have my bubble around me, and it just feels like I'm at home, and that, I think, is really helping him.
I think that every driver's got to do what they feel most comfortable with, and if it was for Valtteri to take himself away and put him in that bubble, that's perfect. We've heard from him a lot about how he doesn't want contract negotiations to distract him, and I think by taking himself away out of the hub and bub, it's kind of let him keep his mindset focused, because at the moment he's very much a championship contender. And
at the moment he really doesn't have to worry about getting a new contract signed, and we'll explain all of that as we go on, because we are here at Ferrari and all the news has been about this guy. Of course, we talked about it last week. We talked about what was going on at Racing Point. Could Sebastian Vettel find his way there? And sure enough, we get here, the news is everywhere. It's broken, first in Germany, then in Austria. Racing Point have made him an offer.
They have indeed.
For next season. Now, what did he say with you guys? I'll tell him what he said to us.
I thought he was brilliantly coy in the media press conference. He got asked 5-6 different ways about Racing Point.
Didn't Lenny ask him what his favourite James Bond car was?
Yeah, in the hope, obviously, that he would say Aston Martin. Yes. He didn't. He answered it very cleverly. He said the Z8, which is actually the BMW from Tomorrow Never Dies.
That's the worst Bond car.
No, that's the best Bond car. Also, the best Bond movie, but we
we'll have a debate about that later. See, I said debate again. I can't say that word today. Yes, go on, sorry.
But it was interesting today, he mentioned and confirmed that Racing Point and he have had talks, and I think it's an interesting point, because up until this point we haven't had that confirmation from Sebastian. We're still in the same situation. Both Racing Point drivers have contracts, but the very fact that he's entertained it, I think, is interesting.
Well, we'll get onto them in a minute. He was, he did like to sidestep a little bit, that, he's not giving anything away. But he did say to us today he loves what Racing Point are doing. He thinks it's great. He's just got to decide if it's the project for him, if it's the right project.
I think that's the interesting thing. It's all down to him. Yeah. What does he want to do? Does he want to stay around in Formula One? And if he does he want Racing Point? And I think at the moment that seems like the best opportunity for him. Or does he want to try something different? And honestly, looking at him right now, I think he is still debating it. I think he still isn't ready to quite put the pen on the dotted line.
Or curveball. This entire thing has been a ruse, with Ferrari saying that they are considering going to IndyCar. Is Sebastian actually going to lead Ferrari's IndyCar sojourn? And this whole thing has just been, for him being all upset that he's been dropped by Ferrari. It's all just been an act.
That would be one hell of a curveball, Will.
It'd be one hell of an act as well. An Oscar for Sebastian Vettel if he's managed to pull that one off. Not going to happen. Would be magic though, wouldn't it? Seb and Ferrari go to IndyCar. It would be sensational. Anyway, we'll talk about Racing Point when we get down there. Let's talk about Red Bull very quickly. Were we naive to assume that they would be that quick in Austria, and are we therefore being naive just to assume they're going to be quick here because they were on pole last year?
I think they were quite confident that they would have a strong car in Hungary, I think, generally speaking, because it's tight and twisty. It's a very different circuit to Austria. Yeah. I think Max flattered to deceive in the first 2 races in Austria that he won, and I think they went there with high hopes. Things didn't quite come together, but let's not forget, Red Bull really threatened Mercedes in Austria in a way that, see you later, Claire, in a way that they haven't always been able to do consistently.
Yes.
And I think we've got to keep hold of that they have been a threat in both the first two races.
Well, one car has. And I don't want to be harsh on Alex because he's a mega competitive guy and he's mega fast, we know that, but it's about half a second in quali. He was nowhere near in the Grand Prix last weekend. You know, okay, he didn't get lapped like Pierre Gasly did the season before, but he's got to up his pace. He has to, and because you know what Red Bull are like.
Qualifying is an area that he knows that he's got to improve, but I think race performance, he's kind of done the minimum that he needed to do for Red Bull, which was 4th place.
Yep.
He was very strong. He didn't bottle out of it when he was battling Checo. And I think there's some signs there that if he really keeps pushing and holding it together and builds a rhythm, I think that Alex Albon can be the driver that Red Bull want. But you're so right. Red Bull don't give drivers time. No. So he's got to make sure he gets into some momentum building. And
the big thing is as well, are they the second fastest team in Formula One? Because they may have rivals for that in the form of those racing points, which we'll talk about. I asked Albon about that today. Actually, I asked both drivers. I said, are you just looking forwards to Mercedes and taking the fight to them, or are you looking over your shoulder at the guys behind you? Max said, I don't look behind me. Typical Max answer. Alex said, we don't consider Racing Point a midfield team anymore. They are a top team because we've seen race pace alone. They are as quick as Mercedes, and we saw that in free air. That Racing Point car, and you look at them starting 17th and 14th, or maybe better. They were fast, and in free air, they were Mercedes fast, better than Red Bull fast, and that's huge.
I think you can see from McLaren and Renault that they are concerned about that pace of the Racing Point.
Big time.
And that race in Austria was normal conditions, so they didn't have anything to help them along the way. That was just pure performance. Yeah. So it will be interesting to see how this process evolves and where they end up. And I think these guys definitely want to know, don't they, McLaren?
Yeah, well, we've not even mentioned the protest yet. We'll talk about that in a minute. Of course, McLaren second in the Constructors' Championship, expecting a much more difficult weekend here.
Definitely. I think both Lando and Carlos today have been very positive about their start to the season, that they've taken their opportunities when they've become available. But I think they're very aware that they might have outperformed, should we say, the car that they've got at the moment. But at the end of the day, like you just said, they're second in the championship, and at the day you've got to get the points, and they've done that. And Lando specifically has done that.
Last lap Lando, absolutely amazing. Carlos saying that he just needs a little bit of luck. Obviously that pit stop that went awry last time out, he just needs things to start going his way, is what he told us. Now, Renault, what about these guys? Because I'm really unsure where they fit into the mix right now, and I'm the same as I was after testing, because the McLaren looks good. We know the McLaren is great. It's a great race car. The Ferrari's nowhere. The Red Bull is there or thereabouts with Mercedes. Where are these guys? Are they bottom of the top 10? Are they just outside the top 10 trying to get in again? Where? I don't know. I just don't know.
So I think the truth is they don't know either. I think it was interesting today that Daniel Rick was talking about how the rear of the car feels much more stable this year. Okay. He can get on the power much earlier on the exit of corners, and that just means he's got a car that he can be more confident with and push going forward. The thing that they've got to get on top of is that radiator problem, which they've had, which has impacted them in race 1 and in race 2.
Cooling in race 2 as well,
It's concerning that they made a fix and then they applied it and it didn't work. Yes. Both drivers are confident or hopeful that they will be fixed this time round.
And they both love this track.
Definitely.
They both love this track.
Well, Danny Rick's had some of his best races here, hasn't he?
Yeah, he said he's going to put on some fireworks this weekend. He is seriously excited about racing here. So I don't know if that's just your normal Daniel Ricciardo kind of bravado and all of that kind of thing, or if he genuinely thinks he's got a shot of pulling out some magic result here. I'm not sure.
I think that it's probably a little bit of both. They've got a car this year that they feel that they can fight with. Yeah. And I think that from that point of view, it's got to give him a confidence going into this weekend. He was in his normal chippy self in the press conference today. He's trying to be very...
not chippy.
Chipper, sorry. You're right.
I can't imagine Daniel being chippy
he
ever.
Definitely wasn't chippy. Right. No, you're right. And he was... Yeah, well, there we go.
Talking about being slightly chippy, though, that last lap move between Lance Stroll and Daniel Ricciardo, where Lance didn't make the corner, they both went off and came back on again. Daniel's still not happy about that. And there's a very good reason for that, which is that essentially what happened there was Lance didn't make the corner, the move didn't work, and Lance ran both of them off track. Only Daniel turning out avoided the contact. Lance took the position. So essentially he gained an advantage by leaving the track. Daniel says they're going to talk about it in the driver's briefing because he's really not happy. He's like, well, and imagine that precedent is set. We have the last lap of the race here. Max has been fighting Lewis for the entire race. Max is nowhere near Lewis. Lewis leaves the door open. Max just throws it up the inside, slams on the brakes, everything's smoking. They both run off track at turn 1. Max comes back onto the track ahead of Lewis, wins the Grand Prix. Is that fair? No.
No, and I think that's what Daniel really wants, and he wants clarity going forward because he doesn't want that same instance to happen again because he clearly doesn't think it was very fair.
Yeah.
I think it's great that they're going to talk about it in the drivers' briefing, but also that they have the drivers and the stewards there because it needs to be a collective discussion, doesn't it? Because it doesn't matter if the drivers all agree, they need the stewards to agree as well.
Now we talk about the competitive order. These guys have surprised me because, FP1, race 1, they were at the bottom of the pile, and yet they've scored points in both races so far. They're punching above their weight right now.
Definitely, and I think it shows that they've got two drivers who are trying to make the best of their opportunities when they can, and they've both done that so far this year. Danny, when he was talking today, he was cautious, like he didn't want to get ahead of himself after two, reasonably strong results for these guys. But you're right, I think they're punching, and if they have another unusual weekend, especially with unusual weather, it could be another strong weekend for them.
Right, these guys, where do we start? Should we start with the protest?
Yeah,
because obviously it's moved on a little bit from when we last talked. We now know that it was the brake ducts that were protested. Mm-hmm. And essentially, the notion of protesting the brake ducts is the team have said throughout, they've taken photographs, they've scanned the photographs in, they've copied that Mercedes. But with the brake ducts, you can copy it from the outside, but it's the internals that Renault want investigated by the FIA, because their protestation is you can't perfectly create a new version of that without knowing what the plans are. You have to have that information in order to perfectly replicate what Mercedes had.
Ideally, we need someone like an Otmar or an Andy Green to talk us through why they're so confident, because that is the team's position at the moment. They are confident that what they've done is correct. Yeah. The drivers today, interestingly, Sergio said they are 100% convinced they've got the evidence that they need to prove that what they are doing is right. At the end of the day, the FIA are going to need some time to go through it because, as you just described well, it's not a simple matter to discuss. It's going to take them a while to go through it and do all the checks. But I think we might be waiting a little bit longer to find out what the...
it's going to be a couple of weeks at least. But the team have confirmed they will carry on using those brake ducts, which means that if they're found to have not been legal, any and every result they achieve with those brake ducts on the car will be voided and they will lose the points for it going forward.
I think that also speaks volumes about their confidence, doesn't it? Because if they were even the slightest bit concerned, they might rein back and try and go for an alternative, which I know isn't easy.
Well, yeah, it's not a making of a moment to replace brake ducts. But yes, so that is Racing Point, and that is the protest. But what about the drivers? We know that Sebastian Vettel has an offer on the table from Racing Point. But who would he replace if he accepts it? The theory, the logic that we debated yesterday is you'd replace Lance. Mm-hmm. And yet, in the press conference today, when we spoke to both the drivers, Lance sounded like the least worried of the two.
Yes, he did. He seemed pretty confident, almost annoyed by the fact that he was being asked, as if it was assumed that he would be staying. Yeah. Whereas Checo, obviously a more experienced driver, he's been here before, was a bit more reserved in the way that he dealt with questions, answered them very openly and very honestly. But you did leave that press conference feeling that it was Checo who was going to be the one who would be moving.
Which is actually a little heartbreaking when you consider it was here 2 years ago that Checo had to take that gut-wrenching decision to actually start legal proceedings against the then Force India team, which allowed the new ownership to take over, to turn it into Racing Point, to put it into the position it's in now. He's given everything to that team. He loves that team. He's always said it's family to him. It seems astonishing that he would be let go, particularly when also he's a brilliant driver. They're going to have to pay to get him out of his contract. They lose sportingly and financially if they want to cut him loose. Mm-hmm. It makes no... Look, I'm just cards on the table, makes no sense to me.
If you want to have the best possible lineup, it would be Checo and Sebastian based on their experience and results.
And I'm not digging on Lance here.
No,
I just, if you've got a choice between the two, right, it just seems common sense.
And in Formula One, timing is everything, and it's unfortunate for Lance if we're making that decision that he's so youthful in his career.
Yeah.
But if they want to, are they serious about making top three in the coming years and winning and challenging for podiums regularly, they've got to think about their driver lineup.
If Checo doesn't end up at Racing Point, does he end up at Alfa Romeo? Of course, formerly Sauber. He's raced for them before. Team know him, team love him. It'd be a nice little spot for him.
It'll be a really nice bookend, I guess, to a career in the way that Kimi's gone back there and done a similar thing. He mentioned today actually that one team had shown interest.
He also mentioned that a team outside of this paddock had shown interest, and I wonder if it's across the pond in IndyCar, because I think he'd be box office in IndyCar. I
think both those offers show how well respected Checo is across 2 different motorsport series or more.
Or may it be Haas? I just hit myself in the face with the microphone. Might it be Haas? Speaking today to both the drivers, I said to K-Mag, do you want to be back next year? And he sort of looked at me like, are you mad? Of course I want to be back next year. Asked the same question to Roman, and he didn't give me that same answer. He was like, well, I've got to see and I've got to think about it. And I was like, whoa. And I said, look, that's not an answer that I've ever expected or had from an F1 driver before when I've asked about his next year. It's normally like, yeah, I want it. And he sort of admitted that lockdown, being at home with Marion and the kids, it made him take stock of his life. What do I want? And he said, I came into Formula One with the same record as Lewis Hamilton, and he's 6 times world champion, and I'm sitting here like, have I made the wrong choices? Did I go to the wrong place? Am I getting out of the sport what I once did? He said, I loved the last Grand Prix. It was properly racy, having a great time. But it can't be just every now and then. I've got to get some satisfaction from it. And there was a real introspection from him of, I don't know if this is for me anymore, which really took me by surprise.
I think it's really interesting that he's reflecting on those kind of moments now, because you tend to only really do that when you are considering your future. And I'm not retiring Roman, of course, and it might be that he will stick around for a lot longer, but I think it's noteworthy, as you mentioned, the way that he answered that question today. I think the truth is, I'm not sure right as of this moment that Checo probably is going to end up there, but I do think it is a good point to raise that I'm not sure whether Roman is going to stay there.
Yeah, it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Which brings us to the last team, and when we talked at the top about Valtteri not needing to worry really about his future, it's because the one guy that we thought could possibly pose a threat, George Russell, confirmed today that he will be staying with Williams for a 3rd season, seeing out his 3-year contract with the squad. And I think these guys, looking at where they've come over the last couple of weeks, looking at the car they've got underneath them, they've got a really nice thing going here.
Definitely. I think it's really nice for a team that is trying to get on the up to have a stable lineup going forward. For George, there's going to be disappointment that he hasn't made the step up to Mercedes, but they really rate him, and as long as he continues to show strong form this year, that opportunity will come in the future. I think it's great that they've also got Nicholas nailed down as well, because they can have consistency of feedback over 2 years, and they've been impressed from the early signs of what he's achieved. So to have those 2 guys signed up, it's nice also that Williams are in the news for a little bit, and driver market and that kind of thing.
And I got to say, they looked brilliant in qualifying last time out. The car didn't look as good in the race, and they've got to overcome that. I think they have an idea of what the problem is. But George in particular was brilliant. Nicholas, without the flags at the end of his session, might have made it through to Q2 as well. And both of them, crucially, I asked Nicholas about it, and you can't see a lot under these masks, but you could see him beaming when I said, there's a prospect that the race on Sunday's wet. And he was like, I know, like his eyes lit up and you could see his smile coming out from underneath his mask. They want rain, because they can lean on, they're confident in this car and they can lean on it from that first moment in quali. They knew they got a good car in the wet, and anything can happen if it rains. They're begging for rain on Sunday, these guys.
I'm delighted for George that he's now got a Formula One car that, okay, fine, isn't fighting at the front, but feels like a Formula One car that really can go fighting with. And also you stick it in the pack with the Haas and the Alphas, and it can hold its own. Exactly, and I think that rain will offer them the opportunity to really shine, and I think that George has shown already that he can take his opportunities when they come. So let's see if we need wellies on Sunday. Let's hope so. Been a brilliant day. A lot learnt. Who do you put down as favourite for the weekend? What I really like, as it stands now, is that Mercedes and Red Bull are pretty tight here, I think. And hopefully that means we can get a battle, especially if we get some rain thrown in. And it looks unpredictable, the rain. So it's not going to be like a washout like we had in Austria. I think it's going to be in and out, and strategy calls are going to be huge. So I think we're in for a really exciting race. Oh, brilliant. Like a Donington 93, that kind of a thing. Oh, it'd be brilliant, wouldn't it? Great. Lovely stuff. Lawrence, thank you very much. As always, my friend, thank you folks for tuning in. Steve, excellent job not falling over for the entire duration. Sign of a true pro. Folks, thanks for joining in, and we will see you later. From us, though, in the paddock, that's your luck.